Welcome back for another interview in our ongoing series of conversations with folks in the power industry. Today's talk is one that I've been looking forward to for quite some time. Today, my lifelong friend, shipmate who joined the Navy with me, and now regional quality manager for a FANG or Mama company, whichever acronym floats your boat, Eric Guidry joins us. Eric leveraged his naval experience as a Tomahawk Fire Controlman in the Navy. For reference, Fire Controlmen, or FCs, do not fight fires, but create them through the delivery of ordnance on target. FCs, much like Navy electronics technicians, receive 2 years of electrical theory and practical application before moving on to system-specific training on the various fire control systems found in our cruisers, aircraft carriers, destroyers, and pretty much any vessel or land-based system operated by the Navy which employs the use of long-range weapons, radars, and missile systems. Following a stint supporting special operations as a Joint Terminal Attack Controller Instructor, or JTAC instructor in Fallon, Nevada, Eric left the military and has since gained years of experience in various aspects of his field service, including time as a relay technician, PLC technician, project manager, and has even spent some time working in the West Texas oil field before finally landing in his current role in the QA/QC space with Big Tech. Eric, my friend, this interview has been a long time coming. Can you please tell us a little bit more about your background?
Hey, Micah, thanks for the introduction, and it's a pleasure to be here. I love to see how everything's grown, and I'm glad I get to be a part of this right now. To kind of give you a brief background on my history, like you said, we joined the Navy together, and
Long time ago.
A long time ago, man. I mean, if you really start counting back, it's like quarter century.
It's all this gray, man. We earned that,
experience. That's what it is. I did almost 11 years in the Navy as a Tomahawk FC. During that time, had an opportunity to be able to see a lot of things, get to try a lot of new experiences, and kind of having that yes, I'll volunteer. And whenever there's a shortage is kind of what really landed me a lot of opportunity. And I had a chance to, do a couple of deployments, really get in-depth knowledge with the Tomahawk weapon system. And it really opened a lot of doors as far as giving me the availability to, learn how to speak and everything and talk in front of people. And from the Navy, I left and, had a, various colorful career, really, between the railroad, the oil field, and I kind of bounced back and forth between high voltage substation testing, data center commissioning, and then went back into the oil field to do a startup, and spent 2 years getting to manage a multi-million-dollar oil field company, and it was phenomenal. Got to learn from a lot of challenges through COVID and the oil price of oil crashing, and it really led me into the career I'm in now. And for the past 3 years, I've had the opportunity to be able to work with Meta. I'm within the infrastructure division of it, doing construction for data center construction, and I'm a regional quality manager. And what that means is we see we own every scope, not just MEP, but CSLA. Every aspect of the build, comes across our desk, and
I don't want to interrupt, man, but can you, for the acronym side, we're going to have some folks that kind of look that won't understand. Can you tell us what MEP and CLA stand for?
Yes. So MEP is mechanical, electrical, and plumbing.
Gotcha.
So that's going to all your building, air handling units to transformers to wastewater systems. And then you have CSLA, which is going to be your civil, your structure, structural, landscape, and architecture. So they'll, everything from what kind of grass we're getting planted, and how it grows, and the fence line, and so it's an awesome opportunity because there's not one day that's the same. I mean, I constantly stay on my toes, and I never show up to work the next day going, oh man, it's going to be the same old thing, because it's not. When you have over 1,500 people at any given time, on a project, And these projects can last anywhere from 2.5 years to 5 years, depending on the type of build we're doing. So it's been a great experience.
That is awesome, man, and thanks for that. Like I said, it's great just to kind of get a snapshot from where people are coming from and kind of their background and experience to truly show how you can acclimate to a new career. And it's one of those things in big tech is like everybody thinks it's this big hairy beast that is incapable of being overcome and getting hired onto. And so thanks for taking your time to share the story. And kind of like, one of the points of what we're talking about today is showing how folks with a combat systems background truly acclimate to this lifestyle and kind of working in big tech. And a lot of those skills will carry over.
100%.
And so, of course, you and I talk all the time, probably more than most folks do on a regular basis. And I've followed your journey throughout the years, but for the sake of the listeners, I kind of want to expand on your journey from the military to where you are now and whether or not you think your time in the military sets you up for success. Do you think that Tech Corps and your follow-on A&C schools give you a solid basis to pursue the electrical side of your civilian career?
100%. I'll tell you, if there's, the courses I look back, throughout my career that really projected me, or I guess propelled me into where I'm at now and gave me that foundation was definitely Tech Corps. In Tech Corps, I mean, you figure we had, 24 weeks that we were able to go through and really learn every aspect, when it came to AC/DC theory. One thing that sticks in my head that it cracks me up when I think about it is I'll never forget we had an instructor that told us the only thing we needed to be able to get through Tech Corps to learn, everything with electronics and radio and everything else is Ohm's Law and Jack Daniels. And, and it is. You might throw Kirchhoff's voltage law and, a couple other laws in there, but, for the most part, that's what it was. And I love it because the way it was structured out is it taught us from a base level. It taught us the theory first, and then from there we got into actual functional testing on it. From building like a super heterodyne receiver and learning on how to go through and solder, and it was a lot of good information. It was basic, but it was a lot, and that putting you into the A school, and whether you're going FC, DS, ET, back like during our time, it does. The DS side of it, I got to learn the logic side of things and learn how computers actually operate, and the internal sides, counters, flip flops, and such, and that right there has really played a pivotal role, as far as giving me knowledge to be able to get to where I am now, because as an FC, combat systems, I won't even just stick with FC, but anybody in the combat systems role, the one thing that we're taught really well on how to do is embrace ambiguity.
Yes.
At any time stuff could fail, you had to be responsible. You have tech reps and stuff that could fly out when available. But, if you're out in your AOR during the deployment and something goes down, whether it be CWIS, whether it be Tomahawk, whether it be VLS for, SM2 or something, or SPY, whatever the case is, a lot of times you do. You have to figure out the way to get that thing to work in your own means. And so being an FC really gave me the opportunity to kind of almost dream big when we had solutions. When I sat there and maybe our normal, solution, the way the SOP showed us that, we should go about this to fix it. Maybe that's how we find out it didn't work. And that's where, and that's where being in quality now, I look back to then, it was the same thing. It's just, the picture might've been painted a little bit different, but the setting was still the same. And it comes down to, as an FC, you have to learn how to break stuff, because your equipment, that's what your life depends on. That's what your shipmate's life depends on. That's what another command, another ship next to you might be depending, that carrier might be dependent on, your ship for air defense. And if your defense systems are down, there's a lot of life at stake. So that's where, in the Navy, we're taught to go through and, try to take a system, break it as soon as we can. And that way we can start trying to find, ways to mitigate or improve the system. And that way the next go around, we don't have that same issue coming up.
No, 100% agree. And like you said, there's not a rescue force, and that's kind of why we're all firefighters and all that other good stuff.
Right.
So not only do we create the fires, but we also had to learn to put them out. But
Right.
and then I thought personally, like the adaptability and learning to troubleshoot one line diagrams and truly understanding
Mm-hmm.
what components do at a component level was really emphasized, because again, and you mind you, like we had email back in the day, but
Yeah.
typically you'd be on the other side of the ocean, and tech reps hours weren't aligned to that unless you had a casualty report out there.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
Right.
you are alone and unafraid, and like you said, lives are online at all times. Now, do you think in tech core the ETs kind of get the experience as well, and along with, and so folks can understand that don't come from a Navy combat systems background,
Right.
DSs are no longer, they got rolled into the Fire Controlman genre of NECs there. So,
Right.
but do you find, or have you worked with any ETs in the industry? I know that's kind of off our question set, but do they seem to have the similar, similar success?
Oh, 100%. Now, really, so much like in I guess some of the career paths I've gone through, I haven't really ran across as many ETs as far as on the combat system sides. Now, you know, it really comes down, and when I say that, I've ran across a couple of aviation ET, electronics techs,
ATs, yep.
the ATs, and but yeah, the same foundation is there. Most ETs, a lot of them that I know personally, have FAA certifications. So a lot of the ETs I know,
Go on the com radars for the airports and stuff.
yeah, and that's what they work.
Yeah.
They work for FAA, or they work for independent airports, whoever, ILS systems. But yes, they are very successful. On this side of things, where I see a lot of FCs that I've ran across in my past, high voltage testing is right there for an EC, for an FC, even an ET too, but more so an FC, because again, ETs, their area of responsibility, like their scope, is still totally different than from a fire control.
Agreed.
Just for the simple fact that, they got to provide your comms. There's a lot of stuff that they take care of, and the Navy would not operate without ETs. But as far as converting over, they are out there. It's just I think most of the guys I've seen that have an ET background are usually the aviation side, and just for the simple fact they're more used to this, having different test equipment that they're usually taking on aircraft, going through, running different, some of the guys I've talked to as far as on aircraft before they get sent out after overhaul and everything, they have to go through and commission some of their, the avionics and stuff like that. And so they're used to going through on different test sets, running different, scenarios. And that's where I see a lot, as far as between ATs, FCs, and the high voltage side, because they're used to those test sets. They're used to going.
Well, and I think it's kind of important to point out too, as well, because we deal a lot with the RF side of things, which by proxy is going to involve a lot of the high voltage stuff. And that kind of leads me into a segue that again is off script. I do that from time to time. But so obviously we work heavily in the NETA realm. And I know that you and I have had multiple offline conversations on how you've seen FCs translate well into that spectrum of electrical testing, because we're still dealing with relays and all the other various components. Obviously, it's more of a one-off manufacturing for the DoD, but the methodology for testing and things like that is still the same.
Right.
So does that kind of equate to what you're seeing in your industry or sector there?
I've ran across, I'd say probably over 10, more than I can count on my hands. And there were CWIS FC types. And that's one thing that, whether it was out in the oil field, being a ET on a rig, going out, taking care of PLCs, plus the hydraulic side of things, CWIS Tech, they're probably the most versed fire controlman out there, because you learn everything.
Electrical,
mechanical, radar principles,
pneumatic.
Everything that you need for a all up standalone weapon system. And so it is. it directly correlates into the experience and the knowledge that you need to have to be able to come into the high voltage testing side of things. Whether it's need a NICET, it's really being able to be able to learn a system, how it works, understanding the differences. When certain aspects of that equipment fails, what are your results? Like, what are your symptoms going to be from this when you're troubleshooting? And again, when it comes to troubleshooting, I'm not trying to discount anybody out there, coming from the Navy or any other military branch, but I really do. I mean, just in my experience, some of the best troubleshooting people I've ever been around are, for one, they're usually from the Navy, but two, they're usually from combat systems, and we're aircrew, because again, those are two aspects that, when stuff fails, people die.
Right, absolutely. And I will say there is some crossover as well. Obviously, both of us coming from a combat system perspective, and me being a tin can sailor, having floated around and went from tech to supervisory, up and down the chain, we're biased a little bit. I'll give a little shout out to my 12P, the Army Prime Power Bubbas, the Muse Bubbas, and all those guys that actually receive very, very good training and have that 100%. NETA pipeline as well, and also are well versed in troubleshooting, mainly from power generation, distribution, and substation work. But I think it goes to speak highly of, and often slept on, even the amount of the breadth of ability that comes with folks that have served in the military, and especially more of the technical rates. And that's not to say your machinist mates can't do stuff as well. I think it just speaks to very, very, very highly to the curriculum, writ large of the DoD system or construct. So couldn't agree with you more.
And just one other thing, as far as how it really kind of I guess flows over into the testing side of things, is again, like, you can take a document, that's a testing procedure, and anybody that has, a little bit of an IQ, that can understand, at least be able to complement, they should be able to go through and run a test set. The problem is whenever you have specified, parameters that you're trying to fall in, and that equipment falls outside that parameter, that's when the troubleshooting comes into. And if you don't have that analytical, mindset as far as to start looking at it, again, that's where a lot of people start having issues. And that's one thing, again, that the Navy in general, not just on combat systems, but the Navy in general really does teach us, that, hey, look, whenever you hit this one wall, this is, you got to start looking outside the box on it. And that's one way, I do when I think about combat systems in a whole, but also, again, because I work with a lot of former nukes, and it's all bred into us, from basic training up through all throughout our career. Some of us, we get a little bit more than others.
Right. And I'll say too, like, and it's funny that you mentioned the critic, because I equate all that to being the ability to think critically or critical thinking. Right. And then not only considering, where a specific component fits in, but what if your relay test set fails? Okay, now you have to come up with other ways. You can do some secondary injection testing. And then, it might be a fault in another switch gear down the line that's causing issues. And you have to be able to really critically think through and troubleshoot that stuff should the need arise. And I think that's really the break point, or kind of what is truly the difference between like a good tech and a great tech, if that makes sense. Because like you said, most of us can do, read through a procedure, hook up, your test set or whatever other piece of equipment it is, walk through the steps. Is it showing the voltage readout or whatever it may be that's required? Okay, got it. Now I can fill out my report and go from there. But it's the what ifs that follow on the backside that kind of attune to that critical thinking. You agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. And and then the other big challenge that kind of falls on that, as far as like when you're if anybody's out looking, trying to find that role that they want to get into, as far as on the high voltage side, the other part of it is you have to be able to talk to your customer. Especially if you're a field supervisor. Or even if you're just you're out running that test set, and one of their engineers comes up and starts talking to you, you gotta be able to, build that relationship with them. Even if you're on site for 5 days, you still have to, learn how to communicate and be able to, not give a customer like, doomy news that it's not really like the end of the world, but the way it came off from you because you didn't present it right, they take it back to their team, and next thing you know, there's an uproar because, oh my gosh, something's not going to pass. When in reality, you're like, oh, hey, I just got to, redo the grounding on this generator so I have a good solid ground where I'm not getting fluctuation on my meter.
That was the issue.
Right. And so really between that is, if you can really just really look at troubleshooting and know how to talk, the rest of it comes in. The rest of it, especially for an FC or EM, anybody's kind of used to the theory, and they understand that they can look at a one line, where they can look at a more detailed schematic, as far as of the equipment they're looking at, if they can understand that, the knowledge and everything else will follow.
Well, and I think it's great that you point out the customer service aspect, because how many times have you had to get up and give a pre-fire, like a pre-fire brief or something like that? And really, it didn't seem like it was a very beneficial thing to have the knowledge of, but now you can kind of see how that translates into the civilian world. And really, I'm not the most smooth talking individual on the face of the planet, but I do attribute the ability for me to communicate back and forth with folks. A lot of that came from having to do those briefs and being put in the uncomfortable situations.
Well, I mean, it's just like, I'll use examples from Tomahawk. I mean, I remember the first time I did a SlamX, which is a sea launch attack missile exercise. And, I remember having to get on the red phone, and the red phone was like, talking to the president. You're really talking. You're only a couple people away from the presidential order, as far as for a strike. And man, I remember being an E4 for the first time, getting on there, and I remember there was a full bird captain on the other line of it, and I was like, oh my gosh,
God, what are we gonna do?
But all that time, like going through SlamXs, and then getting a chance to go out to other ships and be able to assist them with their SlamXs and teaching other junior crews. All that time that I had experience doing that led me into where I'm at now, because now 100%. Instead of talking to my CO or something like that, I might be picking the phone up to one of my vendors and talking to their COO or their VP or something. And you just have to, even though we're the customer, you still have to have that communication, and you have to, just build those relationships, because I'll tell you, in my experience, the one thing that is key to any successful project you do is having a solid relationship with the people you work with. If you have that, I don't care what happens in the project, you'll be able to get through it.
Right. Well, and tell me if you agree with this too, but I know you and I have talked offline many, many times about imposter syndrome and how that kind of affects it. And it'll shoot your confidence down so freaking fast. But that was another thing I think that we were well versed in. Do I still get it on occasion? Abso-freaking-lutely. You know what I mean? And it's always going to come with the uncertainty of whatever a new situation presents. And I think that's normal. But by and large, I would say that the experience that we gained in the military definitely contributed to being successful in fighting 100%. Through that stuff. Would you agree?
Yes. I mean, when I compare, like, as far as my educational background compared to some of these geniuses that I work around, and when I mean geniuses, I mean
literal geniuses.
I work with some of the smartest, brightest people that I could ever imagine working with, and it's amazing because, one thing I remember always being taught way back in the day, my granddad always told me, it was like, never go into a room being the smartest person. Surround yourself in a room full of smart people. Just make sure you can understand what they're talking about. And that's what I get to do every day. I get to take
that's awesome, dude.
All this experience, all this knowledge, and it filters right through me. And I get to take the best recommendations from the smartest minds in the room, and we be able to work out, we get to find paths forward, to any of our issues or, anything that we're trying to do. And it's one of those things that, the people side of it, and communicating is one of the biggest aspects of anything that you can do in this industry.
Yep. And I love the fact that Chuck used that as one of those phrases, you know what I mean? And that's what I always kind of led by too. If you're the smartest one in the room, it's time to find a different room. Yeah. You know what I mean? And because you're not going to grow.
But that falls into that imposter syndrome, because I remember, it was almost 3 years ago to the date when I joined the Meta program. I mean,
you and I talked about this ad nauseum, man.
I left New Mexico going to Alabama. I had no clue what I was getting into. Right. And, I remember being told that, hey, this is kind of a high profile. I mean, you're going to have a lot of exposure. And it was crazy because I did. I mean, I was sitting there. I mean, one of the first conversations I had was during my onboarding period. And that's when the first time I really heard about or actually understood what imposter syndrome really was. And one of the guys I was talking to, I mean, he was a lawyer. I mean, he had his bar certification in 2 different states. I mean, he'd been an attorney, had his own business for 15 years. But he had always loved video games. And he decided to join Facebook to do game development. And that's where he was talking about. He's like, man, I'm an attorney. I don't know anything about video games. I mean, other than what he's taught himself.
Right.
But he's successful. I mean, he's doing, great throughout the company. But I mean, and that's what I just want people to understand as far as like when they're looking to get into like a new career out of the military, especially when it comes to like high voltage testing. Mm-hmm. It can be intimidating. It really can, especially when you start hearing like the terms 138 kV or,
big stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those. It's like, okay, that stuff will kill you, you know.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
at the same time, like everybody has to start somewhere, and
Yep.
coming from combat systems, or Army Prime, you already have the foundation. Now you just got to learn the outside process of how it
Yep.
works, and just learn how to do it safe. And the great thing
Yep.
about it, all the companies that are out there that are looking for like either NITA or NISET, look, you're the greatest valuable asset they have when you're there. And I'll tell you, they do a
Absolutely.
great job as far as following on training, between like OSHA 10, OSHA 30, NFPA, you
Yep.
know, everything that's out there. They're going to ensure that you have the knowledge to be safe. And the people I've worked with throughout the industry, I mean, they were top notch. I mean, it's one of those things. It was a lot like being in the military, because when it came to safety, everybody was aware of what happens when an arc flash happens, and nobody wants to
Yeah.
get caught up in an arc flash. I mean, nobody wants to be
Absolutely
that
not.
person, telling your partner's, wife and kids that, I'm sorry, I didn't do a better job, keeping your husband and father safe, and that's where it kind of comes back into the military too, because
Yep.
you have to have each other's back.
Absolutely. And I think it's funny too, and I know you and I have talked about this as well. Even those really, really smart people in the room, the ones that are just the biggest brain, the biggest, those guys have imposter syndrome as well. It
more
doesn't avoid
more
anybody.
than more than anybody I know.
I know.
Some of the most confident people that I've talked to, in my opinion, were they had confidence as far as what they knew, but they didn't have confidence as far as in the situation they're at, because it's a flip side. Like for me, it's easy for me to talk to people. I have other people that are super smart.
Definitely
They
afraid
feel
of
they
talking.
tell me
Yep.
all the time they feel so awkward talking in front of people. But I've also watched people that were awkward at first, and now 3 years later, they're. I mean, you think they've been doing it for 30 years, because
Right.
it is. It's one of those things. The imposter syndrome, all it is the negative in your head of the what ifs. Like, what
Hmm.
if somebody finds out, like, I don't know this. Well, that's
Right.
what I realize now, is like, for me to know every inch of the scope of every little thing, where I can recall it just like that off memory. I'm sorry, I'm not that guy.
You're not that
But what I
guy.
can do is, if a question comes across that I don't know, I can sit there, with 100% confidence, and be able to explain that, hey, look, what, I don't know the answer to that right now, but
But I
you know
can
what,
get
let me
it.
get back with my team, or let me research. And so if it's one of those, I don't have the resource to find that information, I know who I can go to between all my subject matter experts, or any one of the vast amounts of just awesome people I work with. I can
Yep.
reach back out to them, and then guess what? The next time around, I had that knowledge
Have
now.
the answer.
And that's what I've learned with the, imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is only there if you allow it to be.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more, man. And kind of getting back to the question sets here so I don't run us long. I know that we put a strong emphasis on the preventative maintenance, or PMS as we called it in the military. And as you and I both know, PMS was a major driver and a substantial part of everything that we did on a daily basis. Do you believe that do you see parallels between what you're doing now and kind of the preventative maintenance side of the house?
You do, and I'll use substation maintenance as a great way to look at it. So, like during my course of my career, I went through AVO's, a training facility in Dallas, Texas, and I went through and participated for their substation maintenance 1 and 2 course. And it is, I mean, you have quarterlies, you have semi-annuals, and it's a lot different than kind of the 3M system that I was used to in the Navy. But in reality, it's still, I mean, it's just the same stuff, just different programs. And
Right.
it is, it's one of the biggest, important things you can have on a substation, because you have nitrogen levels, that you have, nitrogen blanket on your transformers. You have to ensure your nitrogen's full, that your blanket's good. Yeah, you have enough pressure, your temperature, your fans. Breakers are another one. I mean, you got to go through and do breaker inspections.
Hmm.
Trip units have to be tested. There's a lot that goes into it as far as maintenance. And yeah, if you're not used to a maintenance program, I'm not saying you can't do it. I mean, it's just like anything else, you can learn it. But coming
Right.
from having a very in-depth and advanced maintenance program, from a ship, coming into the civilian world, it's a pretty easy transition, because you understand the why behind the maintenance.
Well, I think I mentioned it because, like, Trent that joined about when we did. He's running
Right.
a maintenance manager program right now, and it just seemed like there was a lot of equivalency going on within.
There is.
And just wanted to get the big tech perspective on it.
Yeah, I mean, as on the high voltage side, I mean, really depending on what side of things you get into. I mean, if you get in straight just NETA testing, you might just be coming out to, like, for our facility, our PTXs, our pad mount transformers and stuff. I mean, we have a ton of stuff that gets NETA tested, but we have guys that specifically come out and that's all they do is just testing. But then we also have like an operation side that's within Meta called FAC Ops, and those guys after the construction side, those are the guys that they're not really necessarily doing all the maintenance, but they own the contracts for the maintenance that takes place on the on the system, and so it's a comprehensive program for us, but across the board, anybody that's doing maintenance, especially on the substation, most of your city utilities, whoever the owner is of that substation, they're going to have a huge maintenance program in place.
Gotcha. And so we had mentioned before your time as a Tomahawk FC, and I don't think we touched on you being a commissioning member on the Macampa when they were going through stuff. But one of the things that kind of comes up, and it seemed like it paralleled what you're doing over there at Meta pretty well, is we do a lot of major installs. So we have a lot of the installs, managing the actual construction project in conjunction with third-party folks. And then we run, and I think your buddy Sean mentioned this the other day, as far as the verification test and stuff.
Yep.
And we did what they called systems operability and verification test, or SOVOTs. Right. Does that stuff kind of equate well or translate well over as well?
So just kind of give you a brief run through, like on a, for a pre-commissioning unit, like the McCampbell. So the USS McCampbell DDG-85 is a Flight 2 Alpha. It was a new design destroyer. A lot of upgrades, from the previous version. And the way that works is, go to a shipyard, they start building, they lay down the keel, they start building this thing up. Well, as the ship gets built up, there's different phases that you go through. You have Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie. And, I want to say Alpha, I think is, and it's been a while for the Navy, so I apologize if I'm off on the sequence, but I think Alpha trials is more or less, hey, we got the thing in the water, it floats. Bravo trials, engine fires up, now we can actually, get it out, putt around a little bit. In Charlie trials, hey, we can shoot a missile, we can go through like battle, battle override operations, as far as really get the ship a shakedown run. Well, on the data center with critical facility side, it's no different. We have 5 commissioning phases. You have L1 through L5. And, your L1 is going to be, all your equipment, and ensuring everything in most places, the start of it. Your L2 side of it, that's whenever you start getting, your equipment coming in, you're checking. And between L2 and L3 is like where we do all the pre-energization. So from L2, it pretty much shows up, you go through, get all your checks done, work all the way up through L3.
What are RE checks?
No, all of your charts.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Sorry.
Gotcha. No, you're good. I'm just making sure we keep the acronym solid.
So the whole purpose during that phase is really to ensure that the right equipment gets delivered, all your paperwork is delivered, all your wiring's correct. Everything is ready to go through to energize. And from there, we go into L4. And an L4 test, what that is we're really going through on this piece of equipment, testing it, powering it up, we got power to it, making sure that all these individual systems are working. Gotcha. And then the next thing that we go into is IST, that's integrated systems testing. So what we do is when we run through an IST, we put the data center through full load testing. We check all of our redundancy power, our generators, our batteries. I mean, we go through the full scale because the whole purpose is if we have a turnover date, we'll just say December 1st, 2024 to turn over a data hall. When we turn that data hall, the expectation that we have from our team is that we turn it to our operations team, turnkey, ready to go, no day 2 projects.
Now, does that include servers as well? Are the servers all up and running and spun up at that time, or is it mainly just the actual facility stuff?
Some of the servers could be up. And that's we have a lot of stuff changing right now, just with a lot of the redesigns that we're doing and how we're moving. I can't get too much in that detail of it, But yeah, for the most part, the way it's going to go is we'll get about a building that has power, has building controls. It's a full scale, ready to go building, and then we get go through and get all the racks loaded out, and before you know it, we got traffic. So that's the biggest thing we're looking at is it's just delivering capacity.
Gotcha. Very cool.
But let me add, with good quality. And
with good quality. If not, you wouldn't have a job, right?
Right. No, and that's one. Another thing I love about working at Meta is because our quality program. It's a pretty robust program. I mean, I get to hear from a lot of our vendors that work on other big tech company sites, and that's a lot of the feedback that we get that. They appreciate the fact that we outline our expectations in full clarity. But we're also willing to work and be able to collaborate and be able to work through issues. And that's one thing I love about this program, and it allows us to be able to do that, through the whole project.
And that's awesome. And that just touches back on the collaboration aspect that we talked about earlier. It's
right.
So vitally important. Now, can you walk us through some of the relatable skills that you use on a day-to-day as it pertains to what you learn in the military and why you think folks, well, we already kind of touched on why folks would do well from a combat systems background with troubleshooting and theory like that, but how is it applicable in your day-to-day?
I would have to say probably looking back, I remember like right after I got out of ATWIC school, which is Advanced Tomahawk Weapons Control System. Went through that C school, did everything. I remember the first time I actually got out with a ship, and I was with one of my chiefs, and I was sitting there asking a question. I was like, "Hey, how does this work?" And he's like, "Well, did you read this manual?" And he gave me a manual that was like 1,200 pages, and I looked at it, and in my mind, I was like, "Man, you could just tell me the answer. I mean, like it'd be just like that." Right. So instead, I took about 4 days, and I just kind of did a Cliff Notes like version, kind of skimming through, trying to find the issue that I was looking for. That experience right there really set me up for like how I am now. So we have tens upon thousands of pages worth of specifications, drawings, contracts. I mean, there is so much information out there as far as what it takes to build one of these facilities. When I first started, I really kind of fell back on that from the Navy. It's the guy I was working for, my first boss I had, my first manager. He was a former nuke and super smart guy. And it was one of those things. I remember I was about to go up and ask him, like, "Hey, what does CSLA mean?" Because I was Googling it, I could not find it. It was challenging. I was like, "Man, what is this CSLA? Is this like a trick?" Right. Because out in the oil field, I've had times where guy tricks played on me where, just like being in the Navy, being like, "You're about to go under a bridge. Oh crap! Lower the mast." And we're you need to go call for flip. For
you're gonna be set on a goose chase, basically.
Right. And so I was wondering if that's what it was, but luckily I was able to kind of do the same thing. I started reading through more of the specs, and it so happened a couple days into it and a couple thousand pages and different specs, I found my answer, and that's what I was saying: the civil, structural, landscaping, and architect. So it does it, like a lot of my experience. Some stuff comes very easy, but more than anything, like the military has really given me the option to I guess self-rely on, finding the information before I go up and I start asking about, what scenario we're in. We're like, what are our options? A lot of times I can do my own research, and then I can go up, I can listen to the team, and we can make the best decision. And when it came back to whether it was with Tomahawk, whether it was the JTAC class, and, us trying to develop new ways to make the class more efficient, and it does. It comes back to just learning how to be on a team, learning how to collaborate, not being afraid to, like one of the things in my past, I remember it got me, and it kind of goes back to that imposter syndrome, is there were sometimes I didn't ask a question because in my mind it sounded so stupid, but in reality, that was really the solution to the problem we were facing. But I didn't say it at the time because, well, it was whether it was a lack of confidence or just being young and scared, not knowing that, it's all right to talk. And, it's like, there's a difference if it's a life and death situation. You don't want to have to sit there and have that conversation. But if you got time and there's not lives on the line, like, do your research, have those conversations, and, things will work out.
Well, exactly. And if you're not on the lowest end of the bell curve, chances are somebody else is having that same concern or question,
Right.
But we just kind of get spun up in our heads and kind of look at it from that perspective and oftentimes just fail to ask the question that really everyone had at the forefront of their minds.
Yeah.
And you should have asked it instead,
Right. 100%.
And shame on those other people for not asking it as well.
Yeah, I mean, but it's kind of all the trials that we go through life, and
Absolutely.
And really from the military, again, being able to transition into the high voltage side of work, really. Again, those are some of the traits that you get in the military that you might not realize that you have, because you really haven't been put in a position to have to rely on them, because everything that you're used to in the military, and that's one thing I look back. Probably the easiest job I ever had in my life was being in the military, because so much of it was lined out for us, as far as like, this is where you're going, this is when you're going to eat, whatever the case was.
Right.
But everything outside of that, we really did. We had so much freedom to be able to make things work, because when you have a solid team, and that's where, again, I keep on going back to team, because that's the secret sauce. And if you can sit there and find somebody that you can have a conversation with, regardless if you're right, wrong, whatever the case is, if you can have those conversations, everything else falls into place. And I've been on plenty of teams I've started where we didn't have that type of communication, we didn't have those relationships, and now we do. And that's one thing that I've learned from the Navy, because in the Navy we had such a diverse background, so many different perspectives, so many different ideas. And especially when you might be in a work center with 10 people at the same rank, and you got one guy that's a work center suit, and yet everybody's arguing because everybody wants to be the guy that knows everything, because, well, it's, a lot of alpha types in the military. And so transitioning that into the civilian world, you have to realize that, okay, you might have a lot of knowledge, you might have a lot of time troubleshooting some of the stuff you may be working on, you might have experience doing high voltage testing, but again, if you can't transfer that to the next person you're working with, everything you have and everything at the time, it doesn't really matter, because you're not using it.
Well, and I think you just did an excellent job of kind of breaking a popular misconception, is that we are literally, and I get this when I'm talking, just various folks in the industry. A lot of people have the misperception that folks from a military background literally don't understand autonomy and how to be, how to be flexible, how to collaborate, how to do all those things, because it is a common misperception that, if so-and-so says jump, they all assume we just say how high and go on about the business. Right. And I think you highlighted that point very, very well.
Yeah, it is. And, I dealt with it when I first got out, when I joined up with the railroad, got out and started with the railroad. There was, in the military, there was always a time and place for everything to take place. There's always time to joke around. There's time to be serious, but there was also time to ask questions. And like I said, it really comes to the situation and what the urgency of the situation is. And, from the railroad through different companies that I've been with, it was a balancing, act, really, and that was more getting my feet, because again, like different commands, you have different ways things work. Yep. And it's the same thing in the civilian market, job market. Some companies are going to be outstanding with the way the culture is. Other companies, it might be one of those, man, I'm making a ton of money, but I absolutely hate working with the team I'm working with, because this is what the culture. Yeah. And fortunately, I see it in the construction industry, and it's more on the critical facility side of things, but I'm starting to see a change. Like coming from the oil field into the industry I am now was such a breath of fresh air. I love doing what I did in the oil field, but again, it comes down to, being able to have those conversations and being around the like-minded people that want to have those conversations. And absolutely. Again, like I said, I've been in some teams where we didn't have that dynamic, and it was something that we had to work on. And it took the whole group of sitting there banging our heads with each other and, trying to figure this stuff out. And eventually it clicked. And, so back to the military side, a lot of guys, when they get out of the military, if they came from a very micromanaged command, of course, they're going to come out in whatever industry they get into. It's just because it's built in their mind, and that's what they know is micromanagement. So, micromanagement is probably, like, to me, it's like kryptonite to most people. Nobody likes to be micromanaged. So it's one of those, like, if you're transitioning out of the Navy, or out of the Army, whatever the case is, and you go into an area, go in there, realize that you're not the smartest guy, look at everybody like you're a 5-year-old, and take all the basics that you can, take all the information that people are willing to give you, and listen to it. And if you already know it, just tell them how thankful you are for the refresher. We're having more advanced conversations after they get into talking about it. And that was something I struggled with, because I did, like, when I came out of the Navy, man, I was a subject matter expert when it came to Tomahawk.
Right.
I knew the medical. I just had a year and a half of being a field medic. So there was a lot of stuff that I was like, man, you know what, I got a lot of knowledge. And I also realized, though, again, that knowledge doesn't mean anything if you don't know how to talk to people. And right off the bat, I probably came off, when I first came off, I'm sure I came off gun ho and cocky as hell. And and it took me a couple of years to get that adjustment to where I realized that, hey, I'm not the smartest guy out there.
Right. And humility goes a long way in serving you, and a lot of people fail to realize that. Again, you mentioned it. We're all, or I wouldn't say all of us, but a lot were kind of that alpha driven, cocky, confident type. And just learn to eat a little slice of humble pie on occasion definitely serves you well,
Because when you get opportunity to work on multi-million-dollar weapon systems, for the greatest military in the world, and you're entrusted with that. Knowing, like, when I was Tomahawk, I got $1 million. If I shoot a missile, that's $1 million at a minimum. That's a lot of trust that's built into us. It's a lot of trust that's built into our team, that we're actually planning these missions properly, and we're actually going through the steps to get this thing to where it doesn't splash in the water. It actually hits target. And so whatever you come from in the military, most people out of the military that have more than 6 years of experience, they've had $1 million worth of equipment under their direct control for the most part. So when you leave that and you go into a job, now you're working on a transformer, and you're like, man, this isn't the same, this isn't a 5-inch gun system, or or this isn't a 48 radar. It's one of those. It's like, I'm not protecting our freedom. Well, it is. It's the same thing, but the mindset, it takes a little time to kind of just get yourself in that spot, humble yourself down, and realize, like, hey, look, you're starting over. It's new, and just take it in, just like you did the first day and you joined the Navy, like when you first got to boot camp.
Yeah. Well, and I will share, like, I had to have some humble pie coming out of the military because, again, as the rank structure allows for it, I was an executive officer, lieutenant commander. Like, a lot of people in the military think that's a pretty big deal until you get out and you try to rely on what because, again, most of that stuff doesn't translate well to the civilian side. And now you're just going to come across as arrogant and annoying. So again, kind of, taking a step back, take that rank off, look at people as people to people, and leave that portion behind. And I think that does definitely serve folks well. And it's one of those things, as we talk about all the time when I'm doing these transition assistance programs with a lot of senior folks. Like, it sucks to hear it, you know what I mean? But, like, the bottom line is it's so true, and it doesn't correlate. And that is definitely one of those extremely important words of caution that I'll put out there for folks is don't wear your rank when you get out. We're proud of what you did while you were in, but it's time for a fresh start and come in with a little humility, basically.
Yeah, and another thing I want to add to that, because I work with, I'm not going to say I work hand in hand, but I have a lot of conversations with a lot of former Navy COs, especially in the subforce, the subfleet. It's like getting to talk to these guys are great, because a lot of them, man, they've helped me so much professionally, just, having conversations and getting to bounce back on some of their experience, from being a CO or XO. And that's the thing, like, the guys that I see, as far as officers that get out, and senior enlisted as well, the ones that do really well are the ones that get out and they share that. They share some of the stuff they've gone through, and they have a lot of humility, and, they get very vulnerable, and they have those conversations. And I love that, because, again, like, I look at it like our backgrounds, we had the same background, but we split, and, but yet you and I, we still have normal conversations, And that's the thing. I look back in my naval career. I was fortunate. I had a CO that I could have a conversation like this. I could sit there and have a safe space and be able to sit there and say, "Hey, this is exactly where we're at." And luckily, I had 4 chiefs over me that supported every movement on that too. So again, it comes down to having that mindset. Being humble, trying to help, and but I'll tell you, like, the Navy, throughout my career, I think the Navy has been by far probably the highest populace of people that I've worked with when it comes to the military, and it is a lot of it is just because of the way the Navy structures all their training. And you got to think about it. Everything's been built, in my opinion, everything in the Navy's been built off just improving quality, taking lessons learned and improving it. Whether it was, was it the Nautilus, the first nuclear sub, from everything that, took place on that. And I'm sorry if I'm off on the name of the boats, but it comes down to just constantly improving. And the only way you can constantly improve is being able to have good conversation. And
I think you mentioned it too, with your time being a JTAC instructor as well. You're working with the special operations bubbles. You guys are out, you're going, and this is kind of built into what we do as well with our mission debriefs and everything. Everything is iterative. Everything, like to your point, is a continuous improvement process.
Right.
And it seems like that also aligns very, very well with what you're doing in the quality management side of things.
Yeah, I mean, being part of the JTAC curriculum was, for me, that was, I had good leadership before, but that was really when I saw daily active, like legit good leadership. When we would have a class come through, one of the biggest things we had towards the end was feedback. And that's one thing that I loved seeing, how like the SEALs operated, because, feedback is gold. And same thing, exactly what I'm doing right now. If I'm constantly just getting thumbs up that everything's good, like we just had a conversation today, when quality is working right and everything's going good, everything's happy. You don't hear anything. Quality is like invisible. But when things start breaking, that's when quality, the banner starts coming up, and it's like, where's quality? Where's quality? What went wrong? And that's where it's no different than the Navy. The difference is we don't, now granted, if we have a lotto instance, lockout, tag out, something with safety or something, we're just a piece of equipment. Somehow we just, straight up an accident, something fails. You can have loss of life, but we try to mitigate that the best we can by all the safety procedures, all the SOPs, everything that we have lined out. That's what we have to protect everybody. In the Navy, we still had that, but the risk was a lot higher.
Absolutely, I'll agree.
And having constant feedback that was actually utilized, and seeing how the changes were made, and the collaboration that the team had, being able to sit down with all the instructors and talk about different aspects and what could be improved. I love that, and that's something I've carried with me throughout my whole career since then. Is no matter what we're doing, there's always a way we can get better at it. So it's one of those, if you ever think that you're going to get into the job and be like, okay, I got it made, everything's on cruise control. that's when complacency, that's when it rears its ugly head. So just like you're saying, continuous improvement. As long as you keep that mindset, like I said, open communication, what the goal, like what you're driving for, everything does come pretty easy after that, because again, you had the foundation already.
And kind of shifting gears here a little bit. So I'm going to kind of pick your brain from the big tech perspective. So feel free not to answer things if they're, confidential or whatever.
Okay.
But we're seeing a growing need for infrastructure, obviously, to support everything from electric vehicles to the stuff going on with everything seems to be going data centric in Industry 4.0. What are you seeing from that big tech perspective on what we can expect moving forward with regards to the power needs of the future?
Power. Delivering power. If you think about it right now, just a couple years ago, 2021. You think about when Texas got hit with the ice storm, and they were out of power, and it was a fiasco. But it really identified the weakness that we have within our grid, and the only way we can strengthen our grid is to one, increase technology. Get better, a more robust technology that's efficient, stable. And we're getting there. But at the same time, when you start talking relays, everything else, there's a lot of technicality that runs into it that you have to have the right people for. And I think right now, there's a lot of good people out there, but I don't think the workforce is big enough right now to support what's coming down the road. And it's not just with like data centers. But I'll give you an example from a data center. We'll just throw it out there, like 100 megawatts for a project for a data center. Well, 100 megawatts. That's a pretty heavy power demand. So a lot of places they'll go out and build solar farms, or they'll tap off wind farms. Anything they can do for sustained reliability. As far as also putting the power back into the grid. So on that aspect, there's a lot of great plans, but you still have to be able to have the ability to generate the power. And most communities are so against, because they don't understand enough. They don't want to go the nuke route. A lot of states, they're not, they're limiting the, coal fire plants and stuff like that. So I see it being a challenge 5-10 years down the road that we're going to really start running out of the capacity. And so, I mean, right now with a lot of our projects that I've been seeing with vendors, they're short on people. Like trying to, get field support and everything else. That's one of the struggles we run into. Well, now with AI, ramped up the way it's going across everything, you really got to think about AI is going to, and it's already allowing us to build faster, to scale faster. So it's one of those that if AI keeps on, progressing the way it does, I think exponentially it's going to grow, and so the power demand is going to be crazy. So unless we come up with better technology that we're getting more out than what we're putting in, I really think it's going to come down to the nuclear side. Like the modular. What I was reading, we were talking about before. Yeah. And to me, that would make the most sense as far as how we can do this, because the demand is not going away. Every time you get a new iPhone, or a new Android or something. Have you ever noticed, like, you go a couple years and you realize like you're waiting like 15 seconds for something to load, but you think about like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Right. So everything is evolving like crazy, and AI is just adding fuel to that fire. So it's one of those, like, the industry is going to be great, but when you start thinking about just the data center, every time I've seen a project come up, I start looking at the amount of warehouses that start getting built after we start the groundwork. So you have, you might have 100,000 square foot facility, or it could be a 1,000,000 square foot facility. And I'm not saying it's directly for our project, but you have an electrical contractor. Maybe they have 3 jobs in that area. Mm-hmm. So they need the room. They go through and coordinate, split it up and everything. And so guess what? There's power demands, because now you got building controls, HVAC, whatever the case is, the load you have from all that external, the external stuff that comes in that supports the project. So again, it's one of those that I really think moving down the road, we're really going to need a lot of high voltage techs, because when it comes to a substation, and transmission lines and protective relays, it's not an electrician that's out doing it. That electrician, he might know how to run that conduit and put that J-box and, do all the NEC side of it, but he's not going to know anything about the testing. He sure's not going to know what to look for if we start having failures. There's not a lot of electricians, and there's quite a few that I've talked to that do understand it, but there's not a lot of electricians out there that you could even have a conversation about power factor, because it's nothing they ever look at. Electrician, they're really looking about just hooking stuff up, not so much how it works. If something doesn't work, they're used to just going through and replacing a circuit or something like that. Mm-hmm. So it's just one of those things that, in the power side, we need solid technicians. And it is, every time I talk to somebody in the industry, they're always like, hey, do you know anybody that, might be looking for a position or anything? And, that's where I turn to you a lot of times. And so it's something, there's a full plate, and there's gonna be a ton of pie to eat. It's just getting the right people in the industry, and getting them really kind of acquainted to the industry.
And you kind of, a good segue there, you mentioned AI. Where do you see AI kind of taking us from that big tech perspective in the next 5 to 10 years? It's the topic of conversation for many, many folks I've spoken with, so what are you guys seeing, or what's kind of the general trend?
I'm really hoping that AI can help us address like unseen issues. Like everything we do, we try to go through predictable issues. That's what we look at. All the lessons learned from previous projects, everything else, and we try to kind of forecast as far as like, hey, these are possible issues that could pop up that we've seen in the past. What can we do for this project to mitigate it? I'm really hoping with AI, as it gets built, as it the learning gets more in depth, I'm really hoping from a full scale of construction that we can be able to start feeding that into AI, that we can actually start getting better guidance as far as on how to build stuff. Maybe AI can come up with a better way as far as for chill water systems, to be more efficient. So that's what I'm really looking forward to. Is I don't know if there's going to be any drastic, like, just life-changing, inventions that come out, or ideas that come out from AI. I'm sure there will in some aspect, but really my hope from AI is it just allows us to build better, build more efficient, and also just increase the safety. Because ultimately that's what it comes down to. It's, about the people.
Because, touching human life, basically. Yeah. Now, and so this is kind of a little shift of gears, if you will. If you could go back to when you were, FC2 Gidry getting ready, or even FC3 Gidry getting ready to get out, looking back with what you know now, would there be anything you would have advised yourself back then to set yourself up for success going through your career path now?
I would have taken the things that I knew were challenging to me, and I'm very open about it. Like, one of the things that's not my strong point, and I struggle with every day to just get better at, is emails. I don't like communicating via email. I love it as far as, like, if I send an approval over or anything, to have that paper trail. But as far as having good communication, like, emails are not the way I like doing it. I don't even like texting. I'd rather much pick up a phone and talk. But with as busy as our schedules are throughout the day, and I look throughout my past and everything, I probably would have started taking some typing classes, back when I was in the Navy, so I could get better at it, because I knew it was something I didn't like doing. I don't have.
That's what the officers did, man. We both know that.
Right, yeah. Like, I wanted to make sure you guys that were good at doing your job like that y'all had every opportunity to be able to do it. I didn't want to take that away. And
thank you.
But it's small things like that I look back. Speaking. I've never had a problem getting in front of anybody and talking. But the way my delivery has been, throughout the years, it's gotten, it's become significantly better than what it was. But, I do. I mean, I wish, early 2000, I would have, when I was doing instructor training and stuff like that, I wish I would have went to a community course and taken a couple extra public speaking classes, just stuff like that. Because now everything that I do is, I don't get a chance to really get in the weeds so much, but I do have to have enough in-depth knowledge to be able to have the conversation with all my engineers, my subject matter experts, all my cross-functional partners. So the better I can communicate, whether it be a text, email, handwritten, we're talking. Those are some of the things I wish I would have, spent extra time on earlier in my career, because I think it would help me a lot more, now than I could ever imagine.
I couldn't agree with you more. And those are some of those very, they're soft skills, right? That's really what it comes down to, and the ability to kind of master those. And it may have even been a good opportunity. Like, if they're looking for volunteers to go give that SlamX brief or talk on the red phone or do all those other things. Again, as an officer, that's kind of what we're expected to do. But if you really want to be a well-rounded technician and be able to collaborate and communicate well, I couldn't agree more. I think those are two vitally
Look, I mean, things. Hey, when we all joined the Navy, before we got into Tech Corps or whatever rate we went to, whether FC, ET, DS, nuke, whatever the case is, Army prime power, it doesn't matter. When you first got in the military, you didn't know what the hell you were doing. You had no clue about it. So if you can go through that, a couple of those programs, those schools, and you can make it through and you can pass, look, you got the technical side. You might not know the technical what you're getting into right now, but you had the ability and the aptitude to be able to learn it. And most people that have any sort of knowledge with the military, or have had family members that have been on the technical side within the military, they know that. They know that about you, just the way you are. I mean, most of us, we do a lot of things without instructions. It's a lot of trial and error. I mean, so on that aspect, it's just one of those things that you got the technical skill already. Learn the soft skill. The soft skill, I'll tell you,
awesome takeaway, dude. You don't even have to go any further. It's so important.
No, it's just
there's
a lot of people out there. Important. No, there are so many people out there that I know they're amazing, and working with them one-on-one, it's fantastic. Some of them, they just don't have that soft skill though. So it's one of those. It's like, dude, this is the guy that I want to be able to I want him to be able to share all this experience, but I can't have him talk. And because I've been that guy before. I've been that guy.
No, I'm with you, I'm with you.
So it's one of those, like, if you learn the soft skill aspect and you trust in the foundation of knowledge that you already have built, plus your experience, I'll tell you, getting into the high voltage, power side of things, it's going to be a walk in the park for most people. Awesome. I'm not saying it's easy. There's a lot of challenges to it and everything, but if you have the mindset knowing that you have the tools and the ability to be able to learn the soft side of it, get out of the military mindset of how some things work, and just be open, be vulnerable, and just always be ready to listen and learn.
Absolutely. And now this was one of those, and I know it's been a post on LinkedIn. I think Sean posted it the other day. But a lot of us from a military background, we view as what we do as solely operational. You know what I mean? It's not necessarily really a QA QC construct or anything like that. My humble opinion is that, based on that conversation, kind of looking at the feedback, I think more so what we did was more of a QA QC via the maintenance, via things like that. Would you agree with that take?
Totally. I mean,
would you?
Yeah, because just like almost everything we've been talking about, it does. I mean, I really feel that it falls back into QA/QC. Combat, everything combat systems. I mean, every SOP that we've ever had, whether it's going aloft, whether it was lotto, firing, warning orders, everything. Everything's been built off of that, off trials. Lessons learned. Faults popping up, whatever the case is, a lot of that over time, it's been built in to just keep on getting us better. Again, it's the continual improvement. So yeah, on the QA/QC side, the Navy, again, like Sean was saying, as far as on the sub side, again, I will say even from a submarine versus a surface ship, the risk is even up now because you don't have to worry about sinking now. You have to worry about coming back up,
Right. And just the converse nature of it.
Right. Yeah. So if you don't have a team that's redundant with each other as far as knowing each other's positions, and they don't have to be an expert on it, but they, again, like ESWAS, the reason we have ESWAS, guess what? To me, that's to ensure that our ship has quality sailors that can be able to operate that ship in a quality fashion. And when I mean a quality fashion, at 100% readiness. And if we're not at 100% readiness, they can fight that ship at whatever percentage, but they're trying to get the max percentage of being ready as far as what the capabilities allow. So everything that we do as far as in the construction side or testing, it does. I mean, it demands the highest part of quality because again, in testing, if you don't hold a good high quality standard with testing, are you going to be that guy that pencil whips something and turns it over to the customer saying, hey, yeah, you're good to go, and the next thing you know, 2 years later, one of their guys, this arc flash and 3 people die or something, and that all spans because you didn't do quality work. And so again, it comes down to quality is super important, not only just to perform the work, but also to grow the program, or program or project, whatever aspect you're working in, you got to stay on it and you can't let off.
Well, and you and I have kind of talked about this, and this is the next question, our question set. So would you ultimately come to the conclusion that folks with the combat systems background or military in general, I know the conversation is more geared towards combat systems, but would you say those guys do very well in the tech space or with big tech, 100%?
Yeah, I mean, and even to get away just from the Navy side of it, last year, I mean, I had a guy that he was a Army officer as well, he was one of my right hand men. He was on the project. I mean, he took control of it, and that's the thing about it is he had a good electrical background, but he had the soft skills, and again, that's where it really comes down to. It is almost anybody's can get into the industry. For the most part, they're going to have the technical aptitude for it. It's really just it's the soft side of it, knowing how you're going to be able to interact with the teams and communicate. That's really going to be a key part because we've all been around it. Nobody wants to be around that guy that knows it all or is always right or just doesn't listen, where it's always about him. Nobody wants to work with that person. So and a lot of us sometimes, because again, if you're in a type A environment, a lot of times that's how you are because, well, when you're around a lot of alphas, that's how you have to communicate.
Makes sense.
But I found out that's how we're trained in the military because that's what they need. They need a lot of alphas. Out in the civilian world, I work with a ton of alphas now, but it's a bunch of alphas that know how to howl together.
Well, that's not a bad thing, and I like that. A bunch of alphas that like to howl together. Well, brother, we're coming up on an hour and 10 here, so we're right on time. Yeah. I want to leave the floor open. Any final thoughts? Any recommendations? And then following that, how can folks get in touch with you, provided that you're willing to connect with folks and share your knowledge?
Yeah. You can definitely reach out to me on LinkedIn. It's Eric Guidry, EricGuidry. If you have any questions or if you have any interest, learning more about the data center world, definitely reach out to me. I'll be more than happy to sit down and talk to you.
Dude, that is awesome. And again, this has been a long time coming. We've been talking about it for a while. Finally got you set up on the tech side so that we could have the conversation. And dude, I just appreciate you sharing the story. And I think hopefully it will go a long way in kind of showing combat systems, Bubba's, that big tech is not off limits. You can succeed. Get over your freaking imposter syndrome. Yep. And then network. You have to network to find these folks. And that's why we have interviews with folks like you and others throughout the industry to make sure that we're sharing the knowledge and wealth. And what I'll do is I'll tag you in the post as we start sharing them in clip form. And dude, I truly appreciate your time today. And we'll catch up on the flip side as we always do and kind of keep things moving along. But man, thank you so much for your time today.
No, my pleasure. I'm glad I was able to join up and get to talk. And again, like you said, it's been a long time coming, and I'm just glad the time and everything kind of worked out and we're able to get this done.
Absolutely, brother. Well, until next time, folks, we'll catch you on the flip side. Micah out.